The late afternoon sun painted the empty industrial street in shades of gold and shadow. The distant hum of traffic was drowned out by the roar of motorcycles that grew louder with each passing second. 3 bikers, all dressed in worn leather jackets, heavy boots, and chains rattling against their hips, rode side by side like predators, marking their territory. Their laughter echoed against the brick walls of abandoned warehouses, a mix of arrogance and menace. They spotted him immediately, a man walking calmly in their direction, hands in his pockets, unhurried, completely at ease. A few seconds later, they circled him, engines growling like beasts ready to strike. The leader, a massive man with a scar running across his left cheek, revved his bike, deliberately kicking up dust at Steven Seagal's feet. "Hey, old man, you lost or something?" He sneered, spitting onto the asphalt. "Yeah, this street ain't for walking. Move along before you get hurt," added the smallest of the 3, twirling a chain in his hand like a weapon. Steven didn't flinch. He didn't even glance at them. His eyes were calm, focused, like a predator who knew the exact moment to strike. His presence alone seemed to silence the hum of the motorcycles, yet he remained perfectly relaxed. There was no fear, no tension, just the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse than these 3 loudmouths. The bikers exchanged smirks, thinking this was easy. They had the numbers, the noise, the intimidation, everything they needed to make a show of dominance. One of them leaned forward, swinging his arm toward Steven, with a mocking grin. "Maybe you should teach us some moves if you're so tough, old man." But before the fist could land, the world seemed to slow. Dust swirled in golden shafts of sunlight. The wind whispered across the street. For a split second, the bikers didn't know what had happened, and that was the moment everything changed. In that pause, a silent understanding spread among the few people watching from windows and alleyways. This wasn't just a random encounter. Something was about to happen that no one would forget. The bikers' laughter had already begun to fade, replaced by uncertainty. As the calm figure continued his walk, completely unbothered by the roar of engines and the threat of fists. And then it happened, a moment so quick, so precise, that the 3 bikers would never underestimate anyone again. A second later, the street became a battlefield. But not in the way anyone expected. The street stretched for several blocks, lined with abandoned warehouses, broken streetlights, and cracked asphalt, littered with pebbles and scraps of paper. The industrial zone was quiet at first glance, but the low rumble of approaching motorcycles shattered the stillness. The 3 bikers, the scar-faced leader, a bulky man with a tattooed neck, and a wiry, fast-talking young rider sped down the street, revving engines and throwing dust into the air with every turn. Their boots thumped on the pavement as they parked in a casual semicircle, engines roaring like wild animals contained only by their own arrogance. Leather jackets, chains, and helmets that reflected the afternoon sun gave them an air of invincibility. Each biker radiated confidence, the kind only built from years of bullying anyone smaller, slower, or quieter. They laughed loudly, slapping each other on the back, their voices echoing off the warehouse walls. "Man, this street's ours today," the scar-faced leader said, kicking at a loose piece of concrete. "Anyone who steps in our way, we make 'em regret it." The wiry young biker smirked. "Especially old geezers like that guy over there." He pointed toward a figure slowly walking down the far end of the street. At first glance, he looked unremarkable: plain jeans, a faded jacket, calm eyes, hands tucked casually in his pockets. No flashy accessories, no aggressive stance, no attempt to intimidate. Just a man walking. "Yeah, I see him," the bulky biker said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's give him a warm welcome." The scar-faced leader grinned, revealing a gold tooth that glinted in the sunlight. "You think he knows who he's dealing with? He'll learn," the wiry one replied with a laugh. As the 3 bikers circled the man, kicking up dust and engines growling, Steven Seagal didn't alter his pace. Not a step faster, not a hand raised, not a flicker of panic in his expression. He walked with the kind of quiet confidence that immediately unsettled those who expected fear. There was something in his calm, steady gaze that made the air heavier, almost charged, as if time itself had slowed for a moment. The scar-faced leader revved his engine one last time and swung his arm in a mock punch, expecting the man to flinch or stumble. "Hey, old man, step off my street before someone teaches you a lesson." Steven stopped briefly, just enough for the biker to think he had intimidated him. Then he tilted his head slightly, a faint smile touching his lips, almost imperceptible, like a shadow of amusement. "Sometimes, speed without control is dangerous," he said, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise of engines. The bikers exchanged confused glances. What was this? He hadn't dodged, hadn't flinched, hadn't even raised his hands. He had just said something. And in that moment, their laughter faltered for the first time that afternoon. Nearby, from the broken windows of a warehouse, a few workers peeked out, curiosity outweighing fear. One raised a shaky hand, pointing toward the man. "Hey, isn't that?" But before the words left his lips, he realized it didn't matter. The presence alone of the calm figure walking toward the three bikers had shifted the energy of the street. The bikers tried to regain their swagger. The wiry one sneered, waving his chain menacingly. "I said, step off the street, or we'll make you regret it." Steven Seagal took a slow step forward. Dust swirled around his boots, the sunlight catching in his hair, but he did not speed up. He did not panic, and the bikers, feeling the unshakable calm in front of them, felt a strange, creeping doubt. It was subtle at first, a hesitation in their stance, a twitch of the hands gripping the handlebars, a flicker in the scar-faced leader's eyes. They had dealt with threats before. They had been fearless, but this was different. "Who the hell is this guy?" muttered the wiry biker, a slight tremor in his voice. The street was now silent, except for the hum of idling engines. The three bikers, who had moments ago felt untouchable, realized that whatever was coming next, they were no longer in control. And yet, Steven Seagal remained still. No sudden moves, no show of force, just a man walking forward, confident and calm, as if the roar of motorcycles and the menace of three hardened bikers were nothing more than background noise in a world he fully commanded. The tension was palpable, almost tangible, a pause before the storm. And in that pregnant silence, anyone watching would have known. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The three bikers had circled Steven Seagal, engines humming like wild beasts, leather creaking with each subtle movement. The scar-faced leader revved his bike one last time, leaning forward as if to intimidate the man walking toward him. "We said step off, old man. This street belongs to us," he shouted, his voice carrying a cruel edge. The wiry biker twirled a chain in his hands, letting it clink against his boots. "Or what? You'll teach us some fancy moves," he laughed, and the sound grated on the quiet air, echoing against the walls of the deserted warehouses. Seagal slowed his pace slightly, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips, as if amused by their arrogance. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands. His calm presence alone began to unnervingly shift the balance of power. The bikers had expected fear. They thrived on it. But this man was different. "Sometimes speed without control is dangerous," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the roar of engines like a knife through paper. The scar-faced leader scoffed, cracking his knuckles. "Words won't save you, Grandpa." He swung his massive fist toward Seagal's chest in a wide arc, expecting resistance or at least flinching. But Steven didn't move the way anyone expected. Instead, he shifted his weight slightly, a subtle pivot almost too fast to see. The biker's punch, aimed to strike, met only air as if Steven had vanished for a heartbeat. And in that split second, the momentum of the attack carried the leader forward. His boots skidded on loose gravel, and he stumbled, barely keeping balance. The wiry biker tried to take advantage of the moment, swinging his chain with a cruel smirk. "Thought you could dodge that, huh?" Seagal moved again, a quiet, almost imperceptible step to the side. The chain, swinging with force, met only a clean air gap. The biker lost his footing, tripping over the uneven street as the chain snapped back against his arm. Pain flared across his wrist, but worse was the shock of being so easily outmaneuvered. The third biker, bulky and heavily tattooed, charged forward, trying to land a body slam. He lunged, arms outstretched, brute force behind every movement. But Seagal's reaction was a demonstration of fluid mastery. With a subtle shift, a slight rotation of the hips, he guided the attacker's momentum. The man hit the asphalt hard, rolling once before crashing onto the concrete with a harsh thud. The street fell silent for a heartbeat. Even the sound of the motorcycles seemed to fade as the three bikers realized what was happening. Their laughter, Their bravado evaporated. They were no longer predators. They were unsteady, vulnerable, and completely outmatched. Seagal's calm eyes scanned the trio as if reading a book. There was no rage, no aggression, only precision, control, and effortless authority. Each biker tried again, one after another, hoping for a lucky strike, a momentary opening. But every move was anticipated, every attack redirected, every attempt to dominate turned against them with flawless execution. The wiry biker tried to strike Seagal's midsection with a swing of his elbow. The scar-faced leader aimed a headbutt. The bulky biker attempted to tackle him from the side, and each time, Seagal's body moved like water around rocks, smooth, controlled, unstoppable. Within seconds, all three bikers were on the ground, sprawled in positions of defeat, dust rising around them, their expressions a mixture of shock, fear, and disbelief. Bystanders who had gathered behind broken windows or along the edges of the street could hardly believe what they were seeing. Some whispered, "Did he just?" Others recorded the scene on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Seagal didn't raise his voice, didn't taunt. He simply stepped back, giving the bikers space to recover, his calm smile unwavering. The roar of the engines had faded to silence, replaced by the ragged breaths of those who had tried to fight and failed. The three men lay on the asphalt, humbled in ways they had never imagined, the weight of their arrogance crashing down upon them. And then Seagal spoke, his voice low and steady. "Respect is earned, not demanded. Remember that before you test your strength against someone who walks calmly while the world tries to push him over." It was a sentence, simple, yet resonating like a bell in the empty industrial zone. The bikers struggled to rise, not with the confidence they came in with, but with a newfound awareness. They had misjudged the man in front of them, and the lesson came at the cost of their pride. The street was silent, save for the distant hum of traffic, the dust settling on the asphalt, and the quiet footsteps of a man who had just reminded three brash bikers that true power is measured by control, not noise. The street fell into an uncanny silence. The dust from the skirmish hung in the golden light of the late afternoon, swirling lazily around the three bikers, sprawled across the asphalt. Their motorcycles, once roaring and threatening, idled quietly, engines trembling slightly as if even the machines sensed the sudden shift of power. Bystanders who had been peeking from broken windows, alleyways, and doorways could barely process what they had just witnessed. One young man, clutching his phone, whispered to his friend, Did he just throw all three of them down without even raising his voice?" A middle-aged woman stepped cautiously from behind a dumpster, covering her mouth with her hand. He didn't even touch them violently," she said, awe in her voice. It was controlled, precise, like watching water flow around rocks. The three bikers groaned, attempting to rise but failing. Their muscles trembled, adrenaline replaced by a cold shock, and their eyes darted toward Steven Seagal, who remained several paces away, calm and unhurried. His movements were minimal, yet every step carried a sense of quiet authority. The scar-faced leader tried to regain some of his arrogance, lifting his head and brushing gravel from his jacket. This isn't over," he muttered, voice shaky, but even to him, the words felt hollow. He had underestimated the man in front of him, and the impact of that mistake pressed heavily against his chest. The wiry biker, still sprawled awkwardly, shook his head as if trying to clear a fog. I don't understand," he stammered. He didn't even fight. How did we fall?" From the shadows of the warehouses, a few workers and onlookers began murmuring among themselves. Phones were raised, capturing the scene from every angle. Social media would not believe this: a single man taking down three aggressive bikers without breaking a sweat. One older man leaning against a rusted fence squinted and muttered, "I've seen martial arts on TV, but that was something else. That wasn't about force. That was control, balance, calm." The bulky biker finally managed to push himself up, sitting on the asphalt and wiping sweat from his brow. His gaze flicked nervously between his two companions and Steven. We didn't even touch him. He just guided us down," he said, almost whispering, disbelief plain on his face. Steven Seagal didn't move or respond. His eyes, calm and unshaken, scanned the scene, observing each reaction, each flicker of fear and awe. The three bikers were trying to process their humiliation, their misplaced confidence, and the realization that they had misjudged someone who walked with absolute certainty in himself. From the edge of the street, a young boy hiding behind a dumpster peeked through his fingers, whispering, "Wow, he's like a shadow. Nothing phases him. Even the motorcycle seemed subdued, the tires slowly cooling on the asphalt as if the street itself acknowledged a change in authority." Suddenly, one of the bikers tried to rise again, this time more cautiously, but his limbs betrayed him, trembling uncontrollably. He looked at the others, who nodded in silent agreement. They would not stand again, not until they fully understood what had happened. Stephen, meanwhile, took a single step forward, his movements deliberate, measured. The dust swirled around his boots, sunlight glinting off his jacket. Every eye on the street followed him, captivated by a man whose quiet strength made the chaotic display of aggression by the bikers seem almost foolish in comparison. A small crowd had now gathered at the edges, curious residents, workers finishing their shifts, and a few passers-by who had heard the commotion. They whispered among themselves, exchanging looks of shock and awe. "Did you see that?" one asked. Three big bikers, taken down without a single real punch. From a nearby window, a teenager recorded the scene on his phone, narrating breathlessly. This is insane. I've never seen anything like this. He didn't even hit them hard, just controlled them." The three bikers were now on their knees, dust coating their leather jackets and scraped skin. Pride replaced by bewilderment. They looked at Stephen as if seeking answers. They couldn't understand how a single, calm man could hold such power, yet not abuse it. Then came a sound that none of them expected. A low rumble of authority, not from motorcycles, not from shouting, but from footsteps approaching from behind the street. The crowd stiffened, some backing away instinctively. Something else was coming, and it carried weight. The bikers' eyes widened, and a nervous murmur spread through the onlookers. The street, once a stage for chaos, now waited in tense anticipation. Steven Seagal's calm presence had shifted the energy entirely from danger to suspense, from chaos to inevitable revelation. The boy behind the dumpster whispered, almost to himself, "Something's going to happen next. I just know it." And in that heavy, charged silence, the street held its breath. Everyone watching knew, instinctively, that the next moment would change everything, that the bikers had just glimpsed the surface of a power far beyond their understanding. And the true lesson had yet to come. The rumble of heavy footsteps grew louder, echoing off the cracked concrete walls of the industrial zone. The bystanders' murmurs faltered as a new presence entered the street, deliberate, confident, and commanding attention without a single word. The three bikers, still sprawled on the ground, craned their necks, trying to make sense of the approaching figure. From the shadows of the warehouses, three men in crisp suits appeared, carrying thick folders and tablets, moving with precise coordination, their eyes locked on Steven Seagal. But their expressions weren't of fear. They were calm, respectful, and expectant. "Sir," one called out, voice steady but urgent, "we've been waiting for you." The bikers' eyes widened, disbelief written across every face. They scrambled backward on the asphalt, trying to regain footing, but their movements were clumsy, awkward. "Wait. What? Who is he?" "What?" muttered the scar-faced leader, clutching his leather jacket. The wiry biker stammered. "You mean, he's..." His voice trailed off. Steven Seagal's gaze remained steady, his calm unbroken. He took a deliberate step forward, glancing briefly at the men in suits. They handed him the folders, documents filled with signatures, contracts, and official seals. Without a word, Steven flipped through them with practiced efficiency, scanning pages faster than anyone thought humanly possible. The onlookers leaned in, some craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the documents. Whispers ran through the crowd like wildfire. "Is he the boss? No, it can't be." One of the suited men stepped closer and spoke, voice low but formal. "Sir, the bikers you just dealt with, they were hired by a local gang to test security protocols and intimidation tactics. We expected resistance, but not like this. You exceeded every expectation." The bikers, still on their knees, exchanged panicked glances. Confusion, fear, and disbelief warped their expressions. Wait. So? He's in charge? Muttered the bulky biker, voice trembling. He owns everything? Stephen closed the folder, his expression calm, almost serene. He looked at the three bikers, who were now trying to push themselves to their feet, shame written on every line of their faces. Respect is not earned through fear, aggression, or loud voices, he said slowly, voice carrying across the street. It is earned through discipline, control, and awareness. Remember that. The scar-faced leader swallowed hard, his bravado entirely stripped away. I didn't know, he whispered. We didn't know who you were. You assumed, Stephen said simply. And that was your mistake. Suddenly, the onlookers noticed something more. The bikers' motorcycle symbols of their defiance and aggression now looked small and insignificant beside the quiet authority of the man who had just walked onto their territory. Even the machines seemed to acknowledge the shift in power. The suited men stepped closer to Seagal. One nodded toward the bikers. Sir, they were under the impression they were untouchable. Shall we proceed with the disciplinary measures? Stephen shook his head ever so slightly, a faint smile forming on his lips. No, he said calmly. Humility is a lesson they must feel themselves. Let this experience speak louder than punishment. The bikers sank lower to the ground, still trembling. The scar-faced leader muttered under his breath, I should have known better. Then Stephen turned toward the bystanders, who had gathered at the edges of the street. Take note, he said, voice quiet but carrying clearly. Power is not measured by the size of your muscles, the loudness of your voice, or the speed of your motorcycles. True power lies in control, patience, and respect for others. A ripple of understanding passed through the crowd. Phones raised to record every moment. Gasps, murmurs, and whispered awe filled the space between the warehouses. The bikers, now fully aware of their error, avoided eye contact. Their confidence had crumbled in mere seconds, replaced by a newfound respect for the quiet, controlled presence that had bested them without forceful aggression. They were learning a lesson that would echo long after they left the street. From the alleyways and broken windows, onlookers began talking excitedly, spreading the story of the man who walked calmly into danger and walked out unchanged yet completely dominant. The legend of Steven Seagal's presence had grown exponentially in the span of a single, charged afternoon. The scar-faced leader finally looked up, his voice trembling. You really are? Steven's calm gaze met his. I am simply a man who understands the balance between strength and humility, he said. Then, without another word, he stepped past the bikers, the men in suits following quietly behind him. As he walked down the street, the bikers were left to process what had happened. The lesson was burned into their minds. Arrogance is fragile. Silence can be stronger than noise, and sometimes the one who appears weakest is, in fact, the most powerful of all. The industrial zone returned to stillness, the hum of engines fading into the distance. Dust settled. Shadows stretched across the cracked asphalt, and the story of the calm, unstoppable man Steven Seagal lingered in every mind that had witnessed it, waiting to be retold, shared, and remembered. The street was quiet again, the tension slowly dissipating, but its impact lingered in the dust-filled air. The three bikers sat on the asphalt, still trembling, trying to process the events that had just unfolded. Their motorcycles, once symbols of dominance and aggression, now looked like toys abandoned in the wake of a storm they hadn't seen coming. The scar-faced leader rubbed his temples, trying to understand how a single man walking calmly, without shouting or showing aggression, had so completely dismantled their confidence. I can't believe it, he muttered. We tried everything, and he just made us fall. The wiry biker, still sprawled and clutching his bruised wrist, nodded slowly. It's like he was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I've never felt so powerless. The bulky biker finally pushed himself upright, taking a deep breath. I thought we were the toughest guys around here, but we're nothing compared to him. Nothing. He swallowed hard, a mixture of fear and awe in his eyes. We underestimated him. Big mistake. Steven Seagal remained a few paces ahead, his movements deliberate, calm, and unhurried. He didn't gloat, didn't mock his authority, didn't need noise or theatrics. Every step he took radiated confidence, mastery, and quiet power. The bikers watched him, feeling a strange mixture of respect, shame, and something they had never experienced before: humility. A few onlookers, who had been hiding behind dumpsters or leaning against walls, began to emerge, whispering excitedly to one another. "Did you see that? He didn't even yell at them." One said. "He didn't even hit them hard, he just guided them." The bikers' eyes darted nervously toward the crowd, realizing that their humiliation was witnessed by more than just themselves. The street had transformed from a stage for arrogance into a theater of a lesson in control, precision, and respect. Stephen turned slowly to face them, his expression calm but piercing. "Remember this day," he said, voice low but carrying across the street. "You came here thinking power was about intimidation. You leave knowing it is about control, about patience, about respect. That is strength." The scar-faced leader's voice shook as he spoke. "Sir, we didn't know who you were. We didn't mean disrespect." His words trailed off, swallowed by a sudden realization of the depth of their arrogance. Stephen nodded, his calm gaze unbroken. "That is exactly the problem. You assume that force alone could command respect, but it cannot. Respect is earned, not demanded." The bikers lowered their heads, acknowledging the lesson they had been harshly taught. Their pride had been stripped away, replaced with an awareness of something far greater than mere physical power. They were humbled, not just by the fight, but by the effortless authority of a man who had walked into danger without fear, without aggression, and emerged victorious in a way they could scarcely comprehend. From the crowd, a young boy stepped forward, wide-eyed. "Wow. He didn't even really fight them," he whispered. "He just made them fall." Stephen glanced at the boy and offered the faintest nod, a small, almost imperceptible smile. Strength is not loud. Power is not about dominance. True mastery is quiet, controlled, and aware. The bikers slowly rose to their feet, still unsteady, but with a newfound respect that radiated from their posture. The scar-faced leader muttered again. I understand now. Thank you, I guess." His tone lacked the bravado of before, replaced by humility. Seagal took a single step toward them, closing the distance without threatening. "Go. Learn from this experience. Let it guide you before your arrogance brings you greater harm." The bikers nodded, stumbling slightly but listening. They mounted their motorcycles, engines rumbling low as if acknowledging the lesson. Without a word, they rode away slowly, leaving the street behind, their confidence replaced by a deep awareness of the kind of power they had underestimated. The bystanders remained, silent and awed, witnessing the quiet exit of a man who had just demonstrated mastery without force. Phones lowered, whispers filled the air, and the street itself seemed calmer, transformed by the presence of a man whose reputation was now etched into memory forever. Steven Seagal turned toward the empty industrial street, taking a few steps forward, and then looked back one last time at the bikers, disappearing in the distance. There was no gloating in his eyes, only quiet satisfaction, not in defeating them, but in teaching a lesson that words alone could never convey. A soft breeze stirred the dust and scraps of paper across the asphalt, carrying the weight of the moment. The street, once a battlefield of arrogance, had become a classroom of humility, and as Stephen walked away into the fading sunlight, every witness knew they had seen something rare: true mastery, silent power, and a lesson in respect that would not soon be forgotten. The industrial street, now quiet once more, carried a stillness unlike before. Dust settled slowly over the cracked asphalt, reflecting the late afternoon sunlight in soft, warm tones. The three bikers were gone, riding away with a weight pressing on their shoulders far heavier than any physical blow could deliver. Their arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by an understanding of something deeper, something far more powerful than intimidation or bravado. Those who had watched from windows, alleyways, and doorways whispered among themselves, still in awe. "Did you see that?" one muttered. "He didn't even fight them like we expected. He just controlled the situation." The lesson wasn't just for the bikers. Everyone present could feel it, a silent, undeniable truth radiating from the calm, measured figure of Steven Seagal. His strength wasn't about fists or speed. It wasn't about aggression or loud dominance. It was about precision, patience, and respect. Power expressed through silence, authority through awareness, mastery through humility. Even the young boy who had peeked from behind a dumpster earlier felt the impact. "I want to be like him someday," he whispered to himself. Not loud, not showy, calm, strong, Seagal had walked away without a single raised hand, without a single insult, without a need to prove himself beyond his quiet presence. And that, more than anything, left an impression. The street, once a stage for reckless behavior, ego, and aggression, had become a lesson in respect, control, and integrity. From that day forward, anyone who passed through that industrial zone would remember the quiet man who had walked calmly into danger and reshaped it with nothing but composure. Stories spread fast. Neighbors told neighbors. Those who had witnessed it shared it online. And even the bikers themselves could not forget the lesson burned into their memory. Respect is not something you demand. It cannot be forced or bought. True respect is earned through action, through self-discipline, and through the strength to remain composed when chaos surrounds you. Those who rush, shout, or bully often fail to recognize that the quietest person may hold the greatest power. Even in the simplest moments, a calm step, a steady gaze, a measured word strength manifests. It is in those moments that true mastery is revealed. And for those who forget, the lesson may come sharply, humbling them in ways they cannot anticipate. The street was empty again, but its echoes remained. Dust swirled faintly in the sunlight as the buildings cast long shadows over the cracked pavement. Every witness, whether they had recorded it on their phone, whispered it to a friend, or simply watched in awe, carried the memory of what had happened, and the lesson was clear. Arrogance and aggression fade in the face of calm, confidence, and discipline. Steven Seagal disappeared into the distance, a figure blending with the fading sunlight, leaving only footprints and the memory of his presence. He didn't need applause, recognition, or reward. His impact was quiet, yet undeniable. A demonstration that true power and true respect do not come from dominance, but from mastery, control, and humility. For those watching, the message is simple. Respect everyone, regardless of how small, quiet, or seemingly powerless they may appear. Because one day, the person you underestimate may be the one who teaches you the most important lesson of your life. Type respect in the comments if you believe humility and control are true strength. Share where you're watching from. I want to see how far this lesson travels, and thank everyone who values quiet power over arrogance. Remember, the world often celebrates the loud, the flashy, and the aggressive. But the ones who walk calmly through chaos, who hold their composure while others rage, are the ones who truly shape it. True mastery is silent. True respect is earned. True power is measured not by fear, but by awareness, patience, and the quiet confidence to act when it truly matters. And now, every witness, every bystander, and every viewer carries that lesson forward. Arrogance may be loud, but humility resonates forever, and the legend of the calm, unstoppable man Steven Seagal lives on, not through shouts or headlines, but through the quiet, undeniable strength of his actions.